Grow Great is a city government leadership podcast with Lisa Norris and me, Randy Cantrell. Each week we share insights, experiences, and wisdom to help you and your leadership grow great. Our website is growgreat.com. I don't know if today's generation is all that familiar with children's fables. Maybe they are. My grandkids probably aren't, so I'm going to presuppose that, I don't know, somebody in their 20s may not be as, and I don't know why that is, but so Hans Christian Andersen, The Emperor's New Clothes, we often refer to it as The Emperor Has No Clothes, but the actual story, I think, is titled The Emperor's New Clothes. And just the brief summary is a couple of swindlers come into the country and they claim that they're weavers and they're able to make these magical garments, and they're just trying to dupe the king. And they claim that they're going to be able to make him an outfit that's going to be so spectacular that only people that are unfit in the kingdom, or only people that are just ridiculously stupid, they won't see it. But the wise people, they will see it and they'll appreciate the craft. And so they get all this money from the king and they get all this thread and all this. Well, nobody can see anything. It's all because it's bogus. They're swindlers.
There's nothing there. Yeah.
And so the king continues to dispatch people to check on this, and they come back. Well, they already know the rules of the road. Only an idiot doesn't see this. So they go back to the king. Oh, it looks awesome. The stuff they're making for you, king, it looks awesome, even though there's nothing there. Until finally, the king dons on this imaginary garb, and there's this parade or some procession through town, and of course, everybody's just oohing and ahhing over how great this is, except some little kid who sees the king hasn't got any clothes on. And so once this kid starts shouting, the king's not wearing anything, then these swindlers get exposed. And it leads me to think, how can we not be that emperor? How can we see the truth for what it really is? How can we, and you and I do all this talking and training on these recipe ingredients for leadership, which begin with humility. But even that aside, how can we as leaders prevent that? How can we stop ourselves? I was also thinking about these musicians that perform on stage, and let's assume you've got a drummer and you've got a bass player and you've got a guitar player and you've got a singer, and today they almost all have these in-ear monitors, so they all have these kind of molded earbuds in their ear. And that's so they can hear themselves. So you got all this PA gear and loud volumes. Well, the singer can't hear himself unless he's got these in. And without that, he can't stay on beat. He can't stay in pitch.
On pitch. Uh-huh.
So he needs these in-ear monitors to give him feedback so he knows where he's at in the song. So if we use those things as metaphors for our leadership, because you and I encounter all kinds of problems, we hear from audience members, and the challenge is, and we hear it, I hear it a lot, a failure of leadership. It's a failure of leadership. And when you dig a little bit deeper, inevitably that failure of leadership, as it's characterized by whoever this person is that's talking, that failure of leadership is a leader who's not seeing what other people are seeing, or they're not seeing what many people in the organization are seeing. And it's not a matter of, okay, well, there's a perception difference. It's a matter of, no, too many times the leader is like the emperor's new clothes. They're the king, and people are saying yes when yes isn't the right answer. and maybe fear and all kinds of problems. So the question, how can we avoid that? Whatever our role is, however many people we lead, how can we make sure that we're getting the proper feedback so that the decisions that we're making are not having a negative adverse effect and they're having the desire? I'm going to presuppose that our desired outcome is positive.
I think, that the main thing for me over the years, and I'll talk about us first, feedback for us, just like the singer gets feedback. For me, self-awareness is key. You have to know, just like the singer can tell when they're not on pitch or they're not on beat. We have to recognize when there's something that we maybe have a gap in or are not on point, may not be doing as well as we could be, and work towards that. If you don't have self-awareness and you're just trying to get things knocked out, get things done, but you're not aware of the impact, you're not aware of the atmosphere that's being created, you're not aware of the ability to self-correct and identify those, then growth is going to be stunted, in my opinion, anyway. Because you have to have self-awareness first, and secondly, you have to have a willingness to improve, and you have to be able to work towards, like, whether it's, for me, it was sometimes hard for recognition. I believe in recognition. I want my team to feel recognized, but sometimes it's just not top of mind. So I had to do things to put myself and remind myself I need to do a thank you, and how do the people want to be recognized? And I have to look at that. So for me, it's not only the little things, but it's the big things.
How can you make sure that you've got accurate self-awareness?
Well, there's two ways that I've done it, and I'd be interested if you have different thoughts. One, as I watch my team, I'm acutely in tune with what my team is doing, and knowing them well enough that I watch a lot of facial expressions. I watch how they interact in a group setting when I'm asking questions. And when there's silence, when there's frustration, when there's a tone, I can hear it that they're frustrated. I typically stop and ask, okay, hold on, let's take a break from that. Aside from that, I can tell there's tension. What's the elephant in the room? Let's talk about it. If it's me, just tell me. I always reassure them I am listening. If it's something I'm doing that's irritating you, you need to let me know. I'm not going to change my core, but if I have awareness around something I'm doing that is creating frustration, then I try to improve upon that, so I'm not creating frustration for the team, or I try to work through it so they understand I'm also frustrated and here's why, and let's navigate this together to make it better. We can't fix it, but we can improve upon it. So one, it's asking for feedback. Sometimes it's from your team. Sometimes it's from somebody you trust. Randy, I've gone to you several times when I'm just kind of like, well, this is what I'm thinking, but I'm not always right dead on my approach. Sometimes I can come across too strong, and you'll kind of role play with me and let's see how it sounds. So talk about feedback. Role playing has been super helpful if you have somebody good that can do a realistic role play of what, especially because you know the players in Grand Prairie now that you worked with us for several years. The last thing is, once I have somebody I trust and can ask, that's just another leader, whether they're above me, a peer, or whatever, going up, saying, okay, here's what I'm dealing with. What are you thinking? Or this is how I'm feeling. What are you thinking? And again, I typically go to people I trust. If I don't necessarily respect the feedback, or they completely differ from how I operate, that's not somebody I'd go to. And it's not just I want like-minded. It's because I need an accurate perception of somebody. Your point to leadership is doing for others what they can't do for themselves. So if I'm self-aware, I've got an issue, I want somebody who's going to tell me, yeah, I've seen that before too. What have you tried? Here's what my thinking is. Who are the people? And they start navigating it with me. to get the best possible outcome. But you got to ask. In my opinion, you've got to ask. So self-awareness, asking a peer or a friend or somebody that's going to be honest with you, and sometimes going up the chain to get feedback from leadership that may have a broader perspective than I do on whatever the topic is, but knows me enough to help guide me without telling.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder why there's a lack of courage. I mean, if you go back to the Emperor's New Clothes, the fact that nobody in the kingdom had the courage to tell the king, the emperor, these guys are hoodwinking. They're hoodwinking you.
Mm-hmm.
They're not weavers. They're not weavers. They've got no work product that they can show us. And somebody who can pressure test that on behalf of the king.
They've got his best interest at heart.
Yeah, and I don't know why.
That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and in the story, you just kind of presuppose that they're just a bunch of yes people that are around, and that's more often true than not in a face-to-face.
Mm-hmm.
I'm involved and have been involved for many years now. Conversations that happen in some closed conference room. The leader holds forth, puts down some edict. Everybody knowingly, bobbleheads in the room do this number. And then out in the hallway, the minute the meeting is over, now there's where the real conversations start happening. So I think one thing that a leader could do is can you keep those conversations in that conference room? Because if that's happening, if those hallway conversations are happening and they are completely counter to the conversation you had in the conference room, you got a problem.
Absolutely.
You've got a big problem.
And it runs deeper than you recognize at that point.
Well, it transcends not the hallway, it transcends every building
That's correct.
in the place, and every office and every cubicle. So you need to be able to have those candid conversations in the conference room. I will have a conversation with somebody who's, well, if we keep it in city government, somebody that's below a director level. And even at a director level, that lack of courage it's commonplace.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I understand. I think I understand the deference to a boss and the respect. I just am kind of fascinated at the supposition that to give the emperor a warning that these are swindlers, that is somehow that can't be conveyed in a very respectful way to serve that leader. Because I don't care who you are, I don't care, President of the United States, President of any country, however high up you want to go, got to have people that surround you that are courageous people.
Yeah. Well,
and I think our leaders need people of courage. I want to encourage anybody listening to us, have that kind of courage. Yes, handle it well. Don't step on a landmine and blow yourself up. But if you see a leader in harm's way that they may not see or understand, don't you owe it? Don't you owe it to your boss to serve them that way and do it in the most respectful way possible? Just an awful lot of problems could be avoided if people could find the courage and the know how to do that.
Yeah, and it becomes difficult at times, especially serving up. We all have that. You have to really know somebody well if you're trying to serve up the chain. It's much easier to serve down or out because they are a peer to you or they are your subordinates and you have the authority to help them, right? The challenge becomes when you're trying to serve up your chain and provide feedback, you really must know them. You must trust them. It must be a safe place. All those things you have to take into consideration. Not that you don't do that with everything else, but serving up can have bumps in the road and landmines, like you said, that you need to be careful to navigate it really well, because that can make a long-standing impression if it's not done well. You can damage things pretty quickly, in my opinion, if you're not navigating that well and carefully.
Yeah, agreed. But but it can be done. It can be done. It
Absolutely.
can be done well, and in keeping with kind of our theme of our definition of leadership, which does include a focus on others and doing for others what they can't do for themselves. The one of the problems or one of the challenges is we presuppose that the higher a person goes up the chain, they no longer need those things. And I don't care who we are.
Wrong.
We all
Wrong.
we all
Yeah.
need those things. And I could even argue and I think make a compelling case we need it even more.
Hmm.
Because as we ascend the ladder, while there's no question our view widens, but our level of detail that we see shrinks.
Right.
So there are problems that we just don't see
Yeah.
because we're too high. We're,
It's it's interesting too because and I faced this when I came into this new role. Gosh, we're upwards on a year and a half now, heading to 2 years. But the challenge, it's interesting as we face new things because you for me, I had done something for so long, I had absolute confidence. Now, I was unafraid to attack new things. I was unafraid to go, well, we'll just figure it out. And then you've got all these things around us with any given person that's like me. Doesn't matter what you're doing and you're listening in the audience. For me, it was a role change. For you, it could be a new project that's uncharted waters or, whatever the case is. But it's not just that, it's all the things around you happening simultaneously that start building this doubt or question marks in your mind like, okay, I'm in a new role. I got new people. I'm leading directors now. They're asking me to do things I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know who to use, which I forever knew who to go to.
yeah, but
Thank goodness I'd been in the same city, so I knew the players.
yeah,
That helped a
and
ton.
you were in a lane, and now you're on 6 lanes.
That's correct. And so it's all the atmospheric stuff going on in your environment besides the one thing that's in front of you. That's where it becomes problematic because you're navigating 10 things, not one. And like I said, when you have somebody's best interest at heart, that counts. But the problem is I was so confident in my prior role that when you navigate all this new stuff, and I remember a phrase somebody said, they're like, "You're not a director anymore." When I was talking about something, I was like, "What the heck does that mean?" You
Right.
know what I mean? So initially, it was a defense mechanism. I didn't say that out loud, but in my head,
Yeah.
I mean, I stopped and paused, and I'm like, "Well, why was that said?" Because then it breaks down confidence a little. You're like, "Well," but I say that to say this. If you don't have self-awareness, so what I was able to do, I'm a processor for those that don't know me. You can say something, I am going to listen. I mean, it stuck out immediately, and it was just a comment. It wasn't even really a hard criticism. It was a comment for somebody who likely had my best interest at heart. And it's stopping me because I'm thinking, why would
But you
they
read
don't
it.
have confidence in me?
But you read it.
You
You
know?
read it as an observation because you didn't have any intel that told you otherwise, and
I
so it's like, okay,
didn't.
well, they're seeing something that I'm not seeing.
Yeah. And so, and all that, because as I thought about it, it's super easy. And I've had many people that I've talked with or have, you probably too, Randy, that have consulted with us. And their common words nowadays is, I get in my own head. I get in my own head. I've done it myself. You said, don't get in your head. I mean, you've warned me, right? But the challenge
Says the
with it
guy who
is,
gets in his own head all the time.
we all do it. It is natural. It is when you question yourself. But I think high performers take that and assess, and that's what, as I navigated that, I was like, what does that mean? Well, I remember I was like, gosh, what does that mean? Am I not doing something because I wasn't intending to be a director? I was trying to provide insight on what I knew in my background. But I had to go ask finally. And I think you encouraged me. You just need it. You don't have the facts. So go ask what it means. And once I had the courage, as we talked about, and because I was in this new role and I was unsure, I didn't want to look weak. I didn't
Yeah,
want
you
to
were
be
already
perceived.
questioning yourself anyway.
Correct. And so, but when I went and sought feedback, I'm like, what did that mean? What did you hear? Because it wasn't the person that said it first. The first person I went to is somebody I trust. And I said, what do you think that meant? And they're like, listen, I went through the same thing myself for like a year. So the fact that you're only doing it at 4 months, congratulations, you
Yeah,
know.
right.
And they said, Lisa, it's natural. Don't worry about it. Here's what I learned. They didn't critique me. They just referenced their own. And this is somebody I really trust.
Hmm.
And so I was like, okay, that's a good point. And they're like, we're at a different level. I think you even said, Randy, you got to have some ego in this role. And I'm so low ego. I'm so for the team. And
But
you're
now in
like, you have to have some
retrospect,
ego.
this is just my observation.
Yeah.
I think it was just generic. I think it was just generic paint with a broad brush advice that
Yeah.
that you were given. I don't think it
Well,
was anything more. I don't think it was specific to you. I think it was because that was their path and they had experienced
yes.
it. That was just going to be their kind of their advice.
Right.
The
Right.
problem is I don't know that it had specific application to you.
Yeah, of course. And the more I learned about it, and honestly, I let it settle. I didn't keep
Sure.
probing because
Right.
I don't want to be perceived because I don't have a lack of confidence. I wasn't yet confident in the role because we were still defining the role. So it's not a self doubting. It was just, what did that mean? Like, I need to be aware so I don't do it again. But as I learned and as these conversations continued, it was, again, they had my best interest at heart, but it all goes back to our point where we started this conversation, is self-awareness. If you discount what somebody says and you don't go ask about it, you may be missing something that you are doing and others aren't saying, right? They aren't telling you. They don't have the courage. To your point, you've given the story of somebody walks in at church, their fly is open. They sit down in front of you and you lean forward and say, hey, dude, your fly's open. They probably walked through the lobby. They've gone in and out of the restroom. They went and got coffee. How many people did they pass that weren't willing to tell them their fly's open and they didn't have their best interest at heart? And whether you knew the person or didn't know the person, you served them in that moment. And I think that's the point here, is the self-awareness. They said something. Why would I discount that and not try to understand it if they were truly trying to help me from a perception they had, whether it was truth, factual, accurate, doesn't matter. What mattered is I needed to understand it. And to our leadership recipe, I had to have courage and humility. One, to realize I may have had a gap at this moment. Two, to go be curious and ask the question to gain the knowledge so I understood, because I don't want to be perceived that I'm acting like a director in a role that I need to not be a director. I'm managing directors, right?
Yeah.
So all those points are what are important to me, and I hope our listeners understand, is have the courage to ask, be aware, get the knowledge you need to improve, because once we are self-aware and improve ourselves, certainly then we can lend more to our team and be a benefit to them in their growth.
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback on the Emperor's New Clothes and say the burden was on the Emperor. The reason the story happened the way it happened is because the Emperor was a bad leader. So I'll wrap up my part. Be a better leader. And it's not that hard. So pull your people in, or the next time that you have your team in a conference room, instead of waiting for these private conversations to ensue after the meeting, encourage to have that conversation in the meeting. And a simple way to do it is the way we started today's show, is to tell your team, we're a band. I mean, think of me as a lead singer. Those in-ear monitors that the singer has to keep them on pitch and to keep them on time, I need those in-ear monitors. You guys are my in-ear monitors. I need feedback. Maybe decisions have been made, maybe decisions are being made, and they've got some negative outcome that I don't see. So I want to have a conversation about what it is I may not be seeing.
Yep.
And if you do that as a leader, it will be interesting. It'll be interesting what kind of conversations you're able to have that otherwise you couldn't have. It'd be great. It'd be great if a team had somebody that had the courage to do that first, so you don't have to. But if you're the boss and you're the leader, then lead the way and start building that kind of a culture. I mean, man alive, if Lisa and I had just a little bit of money for every time we hear about being siloed and decisions being made in isolation, right, and all of that speaks to this topic of we're doing so many things and we're not getting enough feedback to know, is it working the way I want it to work? Am I getting what I hoped I would get? And there's so many negative stories that I hear of reciprocal things that happen that were completely unintended. And now we've got a litany of other problems that ensue that it just pains me every day. They should know, but nobody's willing to tell them. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to put the burden on them. If nobody's telling you, that's your fault. And if nobody's telling you, then it's your responsibility to fix that. Wow. And I think you can fix that.
Beyond that, it's the requirement, I'll end with this, much to your point. One, you have to be self-aware. Two, like you said, you have to be able to seek feedback. And three, you have to be willing to make a change. But you also have to be confident enough in yourself that without a doubt how to navigate that. Because what we're not saying today is that every feedback you get, you have to do something with it. My goal is always to listen to what people say and look for the common thread. Like if one person is saying something and you're like, I don't know about that, but 5 of them are saying the same thing, then there's something to it. Where there's smoke, there is fire. And I always navigate the core, what I'm hearing the most, and not the one-offs. I just don't focus on the one-offs because there's not enough basis at that point to make a change. And we've talked about it before. All this goes to the very specific point of leadership in knowing the way, knowing where you need to go, showing them the way, and then going the way to make a difference. You must do those 3 things and be an example for you to not only change yourself and improve yourself, but to make an impact and help your team become better.
Thanks for watching and listening to Grow Great, a city government leadership podcast. For Lisa Norris, I'm Randy Cantrell. Be well, do good, grow great. The website is growgreat.com.